before we get to follow up and questions for the show, so in my Twitter feed today, this made the rounds. So there is a website called userinyourface.com, and the website is https. We'll put a link in show notes, but https://user in your YER face.com. So it's a play on user interface. So instead of typing interface, replace the T with a Y. And what it is a case study in dark patterns of how websites are people are really, really bad at designing websites. Let's just put it that way. And this person or these people who made this website have turned it into a game where you basically have to work your way through the website. And I don't know if it has an end because I got frustrated.
I'm trying. I'm on a screen right now and I just want to punch my monitor. I have to select. I don't think I'm very far. And I have to select all of the checks.
Well, did you do the dates not matching thing?
Yes.
Yeah, that's where I threw in the towel earlier this afternoon.
I'm past that. And I'm on these series of things where I have to it's basically like a Google capture. There's a bunch of images and I have to check which ones match it. Unfortunately, what it does is you don't realize this at first, but all of the check boxes for each image is above the image. But the way that it has the default scroll is you can't see the top row of check marks, so it looks like you're checking underneath the image, and that is wrong.
I'm so
angry.
Yeah. So the thing about this is that this probably happens in the wild. Like, I guarantee you someone else has made this and thought it was a good idea.
I hope not.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's userinyourface.com. I would say go give that a look. See.
Oh, there is an end. There is an end.
Oh, you made it?
Yes.
Wow. Well, congrats. You beat the game.
It says I am a true interface legend.
You're a true interface legend. I like that. That should be your new nickname. You should put that in your Twitter profile.
Oh, good idea. You just need to stop. Everyone stop what they're doing unless they're in a car, and just go to this website, and see how far you get. It is truly frustrating.
Yeah, it's something.
Woo. But funny.
So that made its rounds in my Twitter feed today, and it was pretty fun. Oh, okay. Well, with that out of the way, so Paul, how you doing?
Oh, not too bad. How about yourself, Drew?
I'm doing pretty good.
So where do you want to start today, Drew? What's on your mind?
I don't know. So I was reviewing our doc, and it looks like we have some suggestions from some friends of the show.
We do. Yeah, we got two suggestions from friends of the show. One face to face and one via email.
We actually got a legit email?
Yes, the second one was a legit email. Yes.
All right, so go ahead and pick one. Let's do this.
Well, I'm kind of excited for the first one. So friend of the show, Colin Ray. Hi, I know you're listening. He wanted to hear us talk about what he calls Amazon gambles. Those are the things that you purchase from Amazon that you felt was kind of risky. Either you knew it was probably like a Chinese knockoff, it was too good to be true, but it was crazy inexpensive, and it ended up being okay, or pretty great. I have gone through my recent Amazon purchase history and picked out a few. How about you, Drew? You got some?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So before we dig into this, I want to hear the definition of risk because there's risk of, hey, I'm going to try this and I don't know if it's going to work. There's also the risk of something might hurt you, and I've got examples of both.
I think risk is what you make it, Drew. So I think both examples are fine.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't you go first? Why don't we go back and forth? I've got a couple, so we go back and forth.
All right. So this first one ended up being pretty good. So where I live kind of right on the verge of the middle of nowhere, and we lose power quite a bit. And it wasn't until recently that I realized that all of my flashlights really stink. Now, I think for me, the most exciting part of this is reading the search engine optimized title for these objects. Okay, so I'm going to read this one to you. It is a QTech, yes, QTech, 5-pack mini LED flashlight, ultra bright, 300 lumens, handheld flashlights, adjustable focus, small for kids, child, camping, cycling, hiking, emergency torchlight. It is a
Wow.
It is a 5-pack of mini flashlights for $15. So that's $3 a flashlight, and they actually work really well. Yeah, but I just love that name. But I was skeptical. Yeah.
So that's in the whole title, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's 3 lines, 3 whole lines. Yeah. It's terrific. But yeah, that way when you search for, I don't know, kids camping or emergency light, you'd find it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it performs well.
Yeah. I mean, they're just little. They only hold 1 AA battery, and they're not much bigger than that. Just enough to kind of house it, have a switch, and the light. Again, I'll put a link in the show notes. But I was kind of like, $3 for a flashlight? How good could they be? Turns out, not bad. Yeah, they even have a little clip, so if you want to be fancy and hanging off your pocket or belt, you can do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds pretty legit. Okay. Well, okay, so the first one that I have, I went through a phase back in probably late 2018, early 2019, where I went on a really, really deep kind of cable management, like, bender.
Okay.
So I looked for good ways to organize cables, right? So basically, for me, cable management exists in one of 3 places. It exists from basically the things on your desk to not on your desk, right? So if I have a mouse or if I have a headphone thing or like this microphone, those cords probably exist on my desk in some form, right? So rather than just random like cords that kind of spread out over the desk, I bought some little cable channel things, right, that go on top of the desk. And then there were the particular desks that I bought, both for my downstairs and upstairs, are standing desks. So I also have, on the standing desk, there are some cable management channels. But one area that I was particularly vexed with was how do I organize things like power bricks and other things on the floor of my office, right? Like there's no... Because like a lot of cords are really long, and it doesn't really matter if your plug is close to your desk or far away from your desk. I just don't want to see a mess and a tangle of things on the floor. So I started doing research about how people handle this particular thing, and I was introduced to the world of cable boxes. So what these are little plastic tubs. They come in various sizes, and they have openings on either end of kind of the long rectangular shape. So what it is cables kind of go in and come out of it, and you put all of your slack or some of your like transformers and things can go in it too. And it has a lid so you don't have to see the inside of it. So the particular one that I ended up with was the Blue Lounge Cable Box Cable Management System. I went with light sage because it was the closest match to my carpet, which my carpet is like a beige color. So I went with that color. But this comes in multiple colors. You can get moonlight blue. You can get bright green if you want to see it. You can get black. They come in different sizes. You can get a 2-pack. They're not inexpensive, but they're not expensive. Like the one that I got from Amazon was, I think, about $19 or $20. Looks like they're a little more expensive now. I don't know why. But that's what I got. And after I bought a couple of those and have been using them, they're fine. I don't see a mess of cords on my floor anymore, which is what I was after. So it was something that I wasn't sure how it was going to work, and it worked out pretty well.
I had no idea these things existed, and now I can't think of anything else. I need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's different brands. I mean, this one looked to be the most plain. It doesn't have like any kind of design or pattern on it other than the logo, which is on the top of the box. But yeah, it worked really well.
So Drew, I'm going to send you a link Hold on. Let me open up messages here. All right. So my daughter came to me, I don't know, it was April 5th, 2019. And apparently one of her friends had this particular toy. And if I know how to use a keyboard correctly, I would send this to you. There we go. So there are these little toy unicorns that have like a snap bracelet on their arm, so you can kind of hook them on your wrist or on your book bag. And she said, "Daddy, I really want one of these." So I looked on Amazon and I found one, and it was $7.99. I thought, that's a little too much, but it's my princess. So I ordered her one. So looking at this description, what do you think I am purchasing?
All right, so let me break this down here.
Yes. Tell me what you think.
Okay, hold on. There's a couple different pictures. Ooh, okay, so I think the third picture does it probably the most justice.
Okay, so you think for $7.99 I'm ordering one?
Okay, well, it depends on what picture you look at. If you look at the first two pictures, which is the same picture, just basically rotated, maybe not, but it looks like you get one. And I don't see a choice of what color you get to pick. I'm going to say you're probably going to get two.
Oh, well, when I received this item, it was quite unusual. It was a much larger box than I expected. And inside, crammed together in a Ziploc freezer bag, was a dozen of these things.
Okay, so hold on. The third picture on the description is what appears to be these things hugging a small person's wrist.
Yes.
So they're probably not super small.
They're not. I would say they're, your average squirrel sized. Yeah.
So you got a Ziploc bag full of squirrels? Is that what I'm hearing?
Basically. I wonder if I have a picture of that.
Well, you should definitely have one for the show.
Yeah, notes. if I can find one, I'll put them in the show notes, because I think I remember taking.
They shipped you a dozen of these things for $8.
Yes, in a Ziploc freezer bag. I kid you not.
I mean, they got to be made of asbestos, right? Like there's,
yeah,
like
yeah. Hold on, there we go.
They can't be good for you.
Yeah, it was.
So the name of this thing is really what I'm into here.
Yeah.
The company is Bull's Eye Toy, but it's Bull's and then a small letter I, Toy, Cutie Cuff. Holy cow! Wow, that's a bag full of this.
I know.
You got a baker's dozen here.
I did. Yeah. Yeah, I was.
Wow.
I was surprised by the quantity and the way they were delivered. I mean, it's honestly a Ziploc freezer bag. A big one, like those big gallon ones. Just
Are
full
there
of
drugs in them? Like, I feel like you may have stumbled onto something here.
I have never opened one up. I certainly hope not, because my daughter ended up giving them out to her friends. She kept a few, but she gave some out. Yeah, it was a very unusual purchase.
Wow, very very much wow. Okay, so that's a pretty good one. So before I talk about my next one, I want to talk about the definition of risk. So I think in the spirit of this particular question, it was posed so far as like, hey, you took a flyer on something and you weren't really sure if it was going to work out or not, and you were bringing to be out a couple bucks. But what if I told you that in addition to that particular challenge, that particular risk, I literally hurt myself on this next purchase?
Okay.
All right. So to back up for a second, probably 5 or 6 years ago, apologies if anybody's eating during this. We need like a sound effect to basically say, if you're eating, don't listen to this part. About 5 or 6 years ago, I had a particularly vexing corn on the bottom of my foot. At first, I thought it was a plantar's wart, but it was a corn. So I went to the podiatrist, and I was fully prepared for like, okay, as I have had plantar's warts before, of they're going to numb the bottom of my foot and they're going to carve this thing out. So I show up there and I'm ready. I've been steeling myself all day for this, and the podiatrist takes a look at it and says, "Yeah, it's a corn." And I said, "Well, can we get rid of it?" And she says, "Sure." And she pulled out of her little lab coat this little like hooked razor, and in like one movement, with no pain at all. She basically flicked this across my foot, and it like carved the whole thing out. And I was simultaneously shocked and relieved because it like took the whole thing off the bottom of my foot. And like it was a deep cut. I didn't bleed. Like it just kind of like hooked it and ripped it. And it worked really well. And you know, I thought, wow, I wish I could buy one of those. And I asked the nice podiatrist lady, like, you know, hey, can I get one of those? And she said, no, I can't sell you these. These are like professional use only. And for years, I have searched different websites and I have looked at different things and tried to find these particular little razors. And like, I don't even know how you would describe them. Like, I can't honestly describe what this thing looks like or how it works. So anyway, a few months back, I had developed yet another corn on my foot because, like, I think it's my shoes or my socks or something, right? It's like a little blister / corn on the bottom of my foot. So I went on Amazon and I'm like, you know, I'm not going to make an appointment at the podiatrist to go in and have this thing taken out. I can do this, right? If I were brave enough, I would just take a razor blade and carve it out myself. But I went on Amazon and I found the Foot Care Pedicure Callus Shaver Hard Skin Remover with wood handle with 10 blades. So this thing is basically, if you pull it up, and we'll make sure we put a link to show notes. So for those of you listening, make sure you go out to the website. It's where you can view all our show notes and everything. It looks like a cheese grater, right? So what it is it's a handle with these little tiny razor blades attached to it. And it has this little head that also has like little serrated blades. And the idea is that, you know, it's a callus and corn remover. So you just kind of like drag it over, you know, hard parts of your skin, and it basically rips pieces of it out. And there's two ways you can use it. You can use it with the little cheese grater head, or you can use it with the razor blade head. So the razor blade head, basically, like, it acts like almost like a potato peeler, where like you kind of like drag it across your skin with a little bit of pressure. You can get some pretty good removal of some skin. The problem with it is that it's just a little too wide for my purposes. So no. I tried using it, and I got most of the skin off of this thing, but I still couldn't quite get the nut of the corn out of there, as it were. So what I ended up doing was disassembling this thing. It comes with extra razor blades. The thing you need to know, and the thing that if I could go back in time, I would probably not do this, is the blades are covered in some kind of substance, and I didn't sterilize it, so I started just carving away at my skin with these little razor blades. I bled all over my carpet, and yeah, it was not a good time. I definitely didn't use this in the method intended. So not only did this thing not work out, that I would call this a bad gamble on Amazon. In all respects, right? It wasn't designed for what I wanted, and it became clear pretty apparently. I don't think I could ship this thing back with blood all over the handle, it literally hurt me.
I'm all wibbly and my sphincter's all tight. Let's see. Do you have any more you want to talk about?
Let's see. The only other stuff that I took flyers on Amazon is I had to buy a North Korean flag.
As one does.
Yeah. Long story. It was for work. It was expensible. I bought a North Korean flag, and it didn't have to be super high quality. Like, I didn't want a nice cloth one. I was going to put it on my flagpole as such. But I needed a North Korean flag, so I ended up going with there's a company called AZ Flag, North Korea flag, 3 foot by 5 foot, North Korean flags, 90 by 150 centimeters, banner, 3 by 5 foot.
I love those Amazon titles. They're the best.
Yeah. I mean, you got to SEO it up, dog. This was it actually had metal grommets, and it served the purpose for what I was after, perfectly fine. Like, it was fine. And I own a North Korea flag, so take that for what it's worth.
All right, so the last one I picked, being a father of a daughter, one of the small pleasures I have in life is going to father and daughter dances. My daughter's elementary school has them every year around Valentine's Day-ish. So, we do the whole thing. She gets a fancy dress. I may or may not wear a tie. So many dads buy their daughters corsages. That's hard for me to say. So like the flowers you put on their wrist, right? Well, the first year I bought her live flowers and she bawled when they died. Just absolutely crumbled. So every year since then, I've been buying her fake corsages made of plastic flowers and imitations. Last year, I decided to see how little money I could spend. So I found, Patiki wrist flower, wrist corsage hand flowers decor for wedding, bridal, prom, party accessories, PS05, fuchsia wrist flower. That's the title. It's a $7 artificial corsage, and it was amazing. Some of the best money I ever spent.
And it didn't make your daughter sad.
No, it did not. It did not die. It did not make my daughter sad. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wins there. A lot of wins there.
It is. Yeah.
The only other thing that I have on my list was when we did the hasp project, I needed paracord, and you don't think that's the kind of thing you want to buy over Amazon, so we needed paracord to make sure that we could tie everything that needed to be on the balloon together. So I went with Tough Grid new 700-pound double reflective paracord parachute cord, 2 vibrant retro reflective strands for the ultimate high visibility cord, 100% nylon, made in USA. I went with orange, and it worked. I mean, it worked, right? It kept all our stuff together. So,
yeah,
nothing flew apart in midair. So
it did not.
No. Yeah. So those are the ones. Everything else on my list is like very purpose bought, either brand name stuff or like, can you really take a flyer on a USB stick? I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, I have other stuff that I kind of bought, sight unseen, but I wouldn't necessarily call it taking a flyer. These are about the closest I can get to that. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that was good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's going to be a crap ton of show notes there. Okay, what else you got? You have another friend of the show question, right?
We do. This one comes from friend of the show, Mike Gadd, and he wants us to talk about cards. And I'll read what he said here. I'd like to hear you guys go deeper into your collective experience with cars. First car, favorite car, next car to get, fantasy car, what you think about EV options. That's electric vehicle for those who aren't savvy. So cars, Drew, how do you feel about cars?
I'm pretty confident to say that I'm a car snob. I definitely like having nice cars. I've owned probably more cars than I should, given my age. I think I'm up to, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm on my seventh car. I'm on my 7th car that I bought.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm not quite 40 yet, so I feel like that's typically what happens is that I buy cars and I usually trade up every 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
I've never leased a car. I've only ever bought them. And typically what happens is I save up a bunch of money and then, I basically trade in the car I have with some equity, depending on how long I keep it. It depends on how much equity that is. And then I turn around and trade that in and take the equity plus another down payment to buy a better car. So I've owned 7 cars that way. And I'll go into my personal history here. So tell me about your purchasing, leasing experiences.
So I am not a car snob. I have never owned a fancy car. Cars are simply a tool that gets me around from place to place in the shortest amount of time possible. Let's see. Counting every car I've ever owned, I've maybe had 6, one less than you, but only the last 2 have been cars that I have selected. The other ones are basically hand-me-downs that I've just acquired or got really cheaply from family. Most of my cars were some form of Ford Escort or one another. My very, very first car was a 1986 Ford Escort. It was boxy, it was silver, and it was horrible. I've had a couple of Ford Escort station wagons. hand-me-downs from my parents. I had a Ford Focus. I believe that was a hand-me-down as well. Or did I buy that one? That's been a long time. The first car that I really selected for myself and considered to be my car was a Honda Civic Hybrid. And I really wanted to like that car, but I didn't. And the car I'm in now is a 2016 Hyundai Sonata. The only thing it's got going for it, it's got CarPlay, which I love. I love CarPlay. It's great. So my cars are very practical, very commutery, just cars that get me from place to place. I've never really desired a car in the same way that other people have, or enjoy fast cars or sports cars. Now, what about you, Gio? Tell me about your car history.
Well, before I do that, are you counting the cars that you have purchased with your wife on that list?
No. So we have, like, some families have family cars. Like, they just kind of like, they share. My wife and I have always had separate vehicles. She likes different kinds of cars than I do. I'm more of your typical sedan, small car kind of guy, where she likes SUVs. So no, I'm not counting her car because those are her cars. They're not my cars.
Okay. I just wanted to set the baseline. Okay.
Nope.
Okay. So yeah, I'm definitely a car snob. It's interesting. When I was growing up, both my parents were teachers, and we were one of the few families on the block that had two cars. A lot of families couldn't afford two cars. A lot of the families that I grew up around, a lot of people were either unemployed or underemployed. So a lot of people just had one car and they carpooled or they shared or they walked to work, because a few of them worked in town where I grew up. Owning a nice car and keeping my cars nice has kind of run in my family. My grandfather on my mom's side was a huge person, huge guy who swore by Consumer Reports and always had copies of it laying around the house. And, they always did the big annual car issue, and I would read that with him. And that was kind of how I got introduced to kind of what makes a good car a good car. And my first car, the car that I would call my own, even though I don't include it on that list of 7 or 8 or whatever, was a hand-me-down. So my dad, when he wasn't teaching, he painted houses. Still does, not quite as much now that he's retired, but he had a work van. And it was a 1987 Chevy Astro van. And it was very boxy. It had really, really small tires. Burn oil like you wouldn't believe. Like I think I put more oil and gas than that thing. Like if I let it sit for more than 2 or 3 days, I would have to basically check the oil to make sure it still had some, because it was like a rolling oil spill at all times.
Yeah, my first car was like that too.
Yeah. So I had that car, and that was kind of what I used to get to and from work and school. So the high school I went to, in order to get a parking permit, you either had to play a sport or work. You couldn't, there weren't enough parking spots for everybody to just drive. So if you didn't have, you had an assigned parking space. There were numbers. No one ever parked in their assigned spaces, but you had to have a parking permit. And because I didn't get my driver's license until I was 17. Because in order to do that, I had to have a job to pay for my own insurance. I had to pay for insurance and gas. That was my mom and dad's rule. So if I had those, I could have my driver's license. So after I finally got a job, I went and took my driver's test, got my driver's license, and drove my dad's van. And I drove that thing my junior and senior year of high school. And I drove it when I would come home for summer break and stuff from college. Now, the other thing is that car met an untimely end, and it was my fault. Because in the summers when I would stay at home with my mom, I would basically drive that car to and from the local subway in Pittsburgh, and I would take that into campus and work for 8 hours and whatnot, and then I would basically commute all the way back to the suburbs and then drive it home. One day I fell asleep on the light rail and got off and was at the top of this hill, and you could see, coming down the hill, I could see the light. was green, and then I kind of went under a railroad trestle, and when I got underneath it, I realized it was red. And by the time I realized it was red, I was already in the intersection, and I T-boned a lady. Everybody was fine, but it ended up totaling my car. My dad was pretty mad and pretty upset. Even though he wasn't at the time, he still kind of holds it against me. He'll never admit it, but because he had that van for years, and that was the end of that. So after that was shortly after that is when I bought my first car. The first car that I bought with my own money was a used 1997 Subaru Outback Sport. It was the Impreza Outback, and it had the slightly beefier engine. Like, it wasn't. This was before Subaru had WRXs. Like, Subaru had STIs. This wasn't the STI. This was the bigger 4-cylinder little Impreza wagon, and that thing was a 5-speed, and I loved that car. Absolutely loved it. And I had that car all the way through, I think, halfway through school. So I think I got it my sophomore year of college, and I kept it at home. I kept it at home when I was at school because I couldn't afford to park it down on campus. But that was the car I used in the summer. It was a great little car, great little 5-speed, great on gas. You could drive it anywhere. It was all-wheel drive. The only thing that ever went wrong with it is there was a wheel bearing that went out that I had to replace. Otherwise, it did great, and I loved that car. And I had that when I moved to Ohio. That was the car I had when I moved here. And I had it for a few years into my first job until I decided to buy my first new car. And I'll always have a special place in my heart for this next car. I had an Acura RSX Type S. It was the year that those cars launched. I knew I wanted one because I've always was a big fan of Honda. My family owned Hondas, and we didn't own any Acuras. So this was the first Acura I ever owned. It was a great car. It was basically the Integra kind of redesigned. And it was very, very fast. It was a little 6-speed, little 4-cylinder, I think. And it was a great little car. It was a little 2-door car. I drove that thing everywhere. It did really well. It was silver. I loved it. And I had that for about 3 years until one day, and this leads me to the car that I regret purchasing the most. One day I was driving past a car dealership, and they had a Volkswagen Jetta. And I think it was a 2005 or a 2006, I forget. Because I think I bought that, I'm pretty sure I bought that RSX in 2003 or 2004. And I had it for like 2.5 years, so I'm pretty sure the math works out. It was like a 2005. It was a Jetta GLI, so it was kind of the one of the higher tiers of Jettas. And I'd always wanted to own a Volkswagen. I've always wanted to own a German car. So I test drove it. It was awesome. It was a 6-speed. It was turbo. It had really nice wheels and really nice tires, and was well appointed inside. And I really wanted to like that car. Unfortunately, it was a lemon. There were a couple things wrong with that car. I had to keep taking it in because the check engine light kept coming on, and I guess they forgot to take something out of the engine when they arrived from the factory. I don't really know what happened. But I kept having to take it in, and then kind of the final straw was I was driving around, and I went over a speed bump, and at low speed, I might add. I went over a speed bump and wound up in a pothole, and it cracked one of my rims.
Ooh.
And they were aftermarket rims, so Volkswagen wouldn't cover it. And, it was like an $800 rim. So I had to buy an extra one of those, and it had summer tires, which then meant I had to buy winter tires, and that was when I swore off switching tires on my own because I hated doing it. Even though I did it once, for like a season.
Right.
But that was the second car I bought, and then after I got tired of that, I basically took a little bit of a loss trading that in, and I went back to Honda. I bought a Honda Civic. The year that they redesigned the look of the Civic, I got the Civic. What was it? The I forget what they call it now. The little sportier one. Hang on a second there. Let me dig at this Civic Type. I think it was the Civic. It wasn't the Type R. Maybe it was. I don't know. But it was the model year that they redid the Civic. I don't think it was the Type R. Maybe it was. I don't know. But it was the year that they redefined the Civic, and it was a little two door. It had the digital dash. It was a little VTEC engine. It was great. It was economical. It was fun. It didn't have the problems of my Jetta, so it was kind of a win-win-win. And I had that car until I paid it off. So I kept that car for 5 years, and I completely paid it off. And I then traded that in for an Infiniti G37 all-wheel drive. So it was the G37X. And I think that was the car that I had when you met me.
I think it was.
Yeah, and I bought that shortly before I switched jobs, and that car was fantastic. It had recently won Car and Driver's Car of the Year back then. I will say that I'm not a big a fan of the Infiniti sedans as when I had the G37X. That car was amazing. It was fast. It was super powerful. It was way more powerful than any car I had owned previously. It was all-wheel drive. Had all the bells and whistles. I got like every option. Like I did it up right with that car, and it was a good car. I had a really positive dealership experience. Like I loved that car, and then I kept that car for about 3 years, and I traded it in for an Infiniti SUV. The reason I traded it in for an SUV for my personal use was we didn't yet have my wife's Subaru, so I wanted something to haul stuff around a little bit better. Because I was shooting a lot, and we were buying stuff for our house, and I just wanted something to move stuff around. But then after we bought my wife's Subaru, I don't know, I kind of got tired of driving an SUV around. So I traded that in for a Audi S4. So that was kind of the first performance German sports car I had. Was a really good car. The problems I had with that car were not related to the performance of the car at all. I had an issue with my satellite antenna on that car, and ended up having to take it in for service quite a bit. And it was a good car. Again, it had summer tires that I didn't put winter tires on, so it wasn't super great when it got a little slushy or wet out. But in the summertime or when it was dry in the winter, fantastic car. Again, 6-speed, so it was a manual. And I really enjoyed driving a manual. I miss having a clutch. Kept that car for about 2.5 years and traded it in, and I'm driving the car that I drive now, which is a Mercedes C43 AMG. Again, sticking with the German theme. And that car is really, really good. I basically had that one built to spec almost. There was one option that I wanted that I could not get, but it was built for me in somewhere, I think it was Alabama or Arkansas. I think it was Alabama. It was built in Alabama or Arkansas, one of the two. Shipped up here, and I took ownership of it 2 Octobers ago. So it's been a really good car. It's definitely the nicest car I've owned yet. I like to show brand loyalty to cars. I showed some brand loyalty to Infiniti because I liked it so much, and of course I've owned, if you count the Acura, I've owned a couple Hondas now. So I definitely like to show some brand loyalty. There's a better than average chance my next car is going to be another Mercedes, unless BMW does something pretty radical with one of their M4s or something. But yeah, so that's kind of my history with cars. Now I notice here in show notes that Mike Gadd wants to know kind of what our next cars or nice to have cars would be. So I've talked quite a bit here. So you take it from here. You tell me what you want next.
Well, here's the thing, Drew, is like I can hear the emotion in your voice about these cars. And you even said you loved one of your cars. I've never loved a car. I've never liked a car. I've had cars that I've hated and cars that I just have. I have no idea what my next car is going to be. I think I have 2.5 more years on this car that I have, and then I'll probably buy something boring after that one as well. I would like to get an electric vehicle. Okay, I'm going to table this for a second, talk about my next car. My next car is probably also going to be a sensible, full-size sedan with a large back seat for my children to be in the back of because they keep getting taller. Yeah, so I really don't know what car is next. I don't follow cars. I go from having a car, deciding that I need a new car, and getting a new car relatively quickly. I don't do a lot of research. I'm just like, that one, do you have it in white? And yeah, so what about you, Drew? Like, so first of all, I'm curious, what makes you love a car?
Okay, so it's funny. When I was working with you, I didn't have a super long commute, and the new job that I have is mostly work at home for the time being. So I'm not even in my car that much, but I'm in my car. I like having a car that I enjoy driving, a car that engages with me. Depending on how I'm feeling. Like if I want to drive fast, if I could drive it fast. Otherwise, it can be sensible. It can be sensible when it's sensible. And in that regard, that's why I've never gravitated towards kind of the more high horsepower, wide body, comfortable American cars, right? Like I know people who will swear by, Chargers and Challengers and Camaros and Corvettes, and that's never been me, just because I don't think American cars are that great. Don't at me. But I want to be in a car that feels nice. I don't know, like that is one thing. Like I mean, you've seen me. I don't necessarily dress that great. I don't invest in a lot of things, right? But I feel like investing in good computers and good cars is kind of pretty on brand for me. So I like the feeling of a nice car. And I've never been to the Mercedes factory. That was on my list to do this year, but that got sidetracked, right? But if you go overseas and you go to like a Mercedes, factory, or you go to the Porsche factory, or you go to any kind of luxury car maker, like you visit their factories, right? You'll see that the extra care and the extra quality of the materials that go into construction, you kind of feel that. And I'll tell you what I love the most about owning a nice car and how I know I'm driving a nice car is when I close the door, what kind of sound does it make?
Okay.
All right. Like if I'm in a quiet garage or it's quiet outside and I open and close the door to my Mercedes, it's simultaneously not heavy, but you can tell that whatever material is in that door, however that is constructed, it closes comfortably and firmly and just sounds like a solid door close. Like if I go out and like if I would compare that to my Honda, right? If I would slam my Honda car door, it just sounds like it sounds kind of like wet spaghetti, right? Like that those rubber ceilings just kind of hit. There's a little tinge of metal when it closes, but closing a nice car door, I really think there's something to that. I know you think I'm crazy. There's something to that, and I can't really quite elaborate on what makes that what it is, but it just feels nice, right? And when you get to the inside, I guess kind of the less plastic that you have in there, you can tell kind of where the money goes, right? And I just like it, I just like I like being in a nice car. I like driving a nice car, I don't know.
Yeah. So, I think again, like this comes back from my family is they always had very, well, at least when I was growing up, very inexpensive, practical cars. Cars weren't a big deal in my life or growing up. So I think when I became an adult, made my own decisions, it was like, is it going to break down? What's the car payment? And for me, does it come in white?
So quick sidebar. I'm also a white car guy.
Yeah.
I like the nice look of either a high gloss or semi-gloss white. Like, I just think cars look best in white. And I have gotten so much crap over the years for that. I don't understand why. I just think they look better. I don't know. The other thing is too, like, it sounds like you and I kind of grew up very similarly, right? Because like my parents had very sensible cars. There wasn't anybody in my family that had a sports car, right? Like no one had a third car, or no one had a car that was, a sporty car. Everybody drove, little economy, domestic cars or little Japanese cars. It was very, very infrequently that you saw people in my hometown in like anything from overseas other than like a Japanese car. You didn't see BMWs or Mercedes or Audis or stuff like that where I grew up. You just didn't have that. Or, you know,
Right.
Jaguar or stuff like that. Like you didn't have those cars where I grew up. And it wasn't until I moved to Ohio that I really saw a lot of foreign cars. And I don't know if that's a function of just the area of town I live in or what, but it's just this is going to sound, again, it's a snobby mentality, but it is a little bit of a status thing too. It is. And
It is. Yeah.
like you get those, like if you've ever bought a car, right, you get a ton of surveys anytime you buy a car or get a car serviced. And like when you buy cars, you get these surveys and it asks you questions like, I feel like my car is a status symbol. And I totally think that it is, right? Like having a nice car, and not only that, but having a nice car and keeping it clean and keeping it running well and not so much showing it off, just having it, you know, as an investment and as something that you're proud of. You know, I think some people would look at that as elitist, and maybe it is, and I'm willing to admit that. But for me, just having a nice car is something that I'm proud of, and something that kind of tells me that I've arrived, you know? Something that tells me that I'm doing okay. And, you know, the other thing, too, and, you know, let's not mince words here, is that, you know, my financial situation is different than most, right? Not having children, you know, dual incomes, like, you know, I'm a little more lent to that. You know, whereas a lot of people who have these cars that, you know, have kids and, you know, the kids are either in college or they're very, very well off. So, you know, I count myself fortunate in a way that I'm in that financial situation that I can do that. And, you know, that could change tomorrow, right? Like if my air conditioner ends up costing me 10 grand tomorrow, right? Like, or my furnace, I should say, if it ends up costing me 10 grand tomorrow, like all bets are off. But like, assuming that I stay healthy and assuming that I stay gainfully employed and everything, I will always strive to buy the car that I want, or the next tier up car that I want, because that's just kind of how I'm hardwired.
So what is your next car, Drew? What are you thinking?
Well, so immediate next car, right? So again, let's say, and again, I'm going to preface this by saying is, you know, let's say that I stay employed, I'm doing well, there's no major bills or unforeseen expenses that are going to make me not be able to do this, right? I'm not the kind of person that will overspend or over leverage myself, I should say. Like it has to be a sensible purchase. Like I'm not going to go from the car I have now to a Lamborghini, right? Like that's just not a practical. It's not a practical upgrade, right? So for me, kind of the next step up for me is if I want to stay kind of in the same vehicle class that I have and have a little bit more power. The answer is probably one of two cars. It's either a BMW C63, which is the next step up from the car I have now, going from an all-wheel drive 6-cylinder to a rear-wheel drive V8, 470 some horsepower, true AMG, not a little baby fake AMG like the C43 is. Very powerful, again, just as well, if not even a little bit more well appointed inside the interior than what I have now. But, you know, that is a car that I will have built. It will take months to arrive and get here when it gets here. It'll probably come from overseas. So, yeah, that would be one. The other one that I'm still keeping my eye on, even though it's kind of an outside shot, would be the M4 from BMW. It kind of fits in that same family as the C63. It's rear-wheel drive. It's a V6. It's not a V8 like the C63, but it still puts out really, really impressive horsepower numbers. It's a BMW, so it's a great driving car. It feels nice to drive. The problem with the M4 is that for less engine, it somehow comes out to be more expensive than a similarly equipped C63, and I'm not sure it's any nicer. Yeah, I feel like that would be a nice outside thing, but here's the thing. When you get into these classes of cars, service visits are very expensive, especially when you get into these bigger V6s and bigger V8s. Like, you're in for multiple hundreds of dollars every time you take it in. And the other thing is, you know, look, we live in Ohio, and I don't necessarily feel comfortable not owning some form of all-wheel drive car in Ohio. Mm-hmm. And I'm not in a place in my life with the current house and where I live that I can have 3 cars, so it isn't like I can keep one of these in the garage for the crappier weather and drive like a little beat-up Civic. I'm not in a place where I can do that because I just can't store 3 cars in my house right now. So,
Right.
If 2-3 years from now that situation changes and I'm in a place where I can have 3 cars, at that point all bets are off, because then I will save up and buy something really ridiculous. But again, depending on what my financial situation is, the other thing I kind of have that I'm looking at is kind of the next tier up in Mercedes. I'd be looking at an E63, which is their E models, which is bigger in terms of wheelbase and length and everything. The E63 is like a 560 some horsepower car, if not more. Again, V8 rear-wheel drive, very, very well appointed, very fast, but just bigger, right? So I think that if I could make the leap up to the E, I would, but that car is probably $40,000 more than what I paid for mine. So that is like that. I'm not going to call that my unicorn car. I'm not going to say that that is what I would ultimately like to own. But if I was going to make the jump up, I feel like I probably need to go to something like a C63 or an M4 before I can afford to trade that in on an E53 or E63. But that's ultimately what I'm working towards. And then what I would ultimately like to own is a Nissan GTR.
Okay.
The Nissan GTR is, I guess, probably the closest thing to like a pure sport, everyday driver / track car that you can own.
Okay. Yep. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, it's almost 600 horsepower. It's all-wheel drive. It's just a phenomenon. It's basically a tech nerd's car, right? It's got a ton of cool stuff in it. I could gush about the performance features and the options that it offers, but when you start getting the colors and the interior you want, you get into $120,000 range pretty quickly on that car.
Yeah.
And the thing is, look, for $120,000, you can also have an AMG Mercedes. So why would I want the GTR over everything else? Well, one, it's the all-wheel drive. The acceleration and handling are kind of unmatched. Not that I would ever take a car to a track just because I'm not a track guy. I just think that the GTR is a great-looking car, great driving car. I've test-driven one at an event, and I fell in love with it. And Nissan also makes good cars, right? And Infiniti is Nissan's luxury brand, so I have experience owning Nissans, and I didn't have a bad experience then. I just think it's a very, very nice car. So I think that those are kind of on my list at some point in my lifetime to own. But we'll see where I'm at in a few years, right? So we're going to see kind of what happens in the next couple of years, because I think I'm probably going to keep the current Mercedes I have at least for 2 more years. And then we'll see where I'm at.
Now, how do you feel about electric vehicles?
I don't think electric vehicles are for me.
Okay.
Part of that is because I also enjoy long driving trips. So when I go on vacation, not just because I don't like flying, but just because I kind of like a long drive. Like if I want to drive from here to Myrtle Beach or Hilton Head or Gatlinburg or something like that, or Washington, D.C., like I like a road trip,
Right.
It gives me time to listen to things like podcasts, and driving and stopping places and exploring is just kind of fun. So I like long trips. I don't want to have to plan my trip around charging stations.
Makes sense.
It's one thing to have an EV to kind of tool around Columbus or Central Ohio. I just don't think that, given my driving habits and how I like to drive, that an EV makes sense for me. Now, if battery technology continues to improve and we get to a place where we can go, 1,000 miles on a charge or something like that, I'm in. But as it stands right now, I think for what they cost versus what you get, I just don't think they're for me. I don't begrudge them. I think if people buy them and they can use them, great. I just don't think for what they cost, they're worth it to me.
Got it. Makes sense.
But you, on the other hand...
I mean, the obviously, when a geek talks about electric cars, they're really talking about Tesla, right? Because there's not a lot of prominent electric vehicles out there that have any kind of draw or attention. For me, it would mostly just be around the technology and being that, hey, I'm on the cutting edge of things. Then honestly, the new Model 3, the kind of mass market, more consumer focused, I think they're ugly. The outside is not attractive. In the inside, it's like basically they took like the most generic car and strapped an iPad inside of it, and it is just very Spartan inside. I don't know. Honestly, for me, being kind of more very price sensitive for my cars, they would probably have to drop a little bit and become a little bit more, you know, a little bit more mass market before I got an electric car. But who knows? I am tired of putting gas in my car all the time, so who knows?
Now, I mean, would you consider a Tesla to be kind of your next car then? Like, is that what you would like to work towards?
I don't know. I mean, maybe the Model S does look nice. That would be by far the most expensive car that I've ever owned. By a lot for me. So, who knows? I've never even test drove one. Yeah, I'm not really thinking about what my next car is going to be. I'm just kind of, trying to get through this one. And then by the time I'm ready to buy my next car, my son will probably be asking for a car of his own. So maybe he'll get my old car. But
yeah, I feel like that's going to factor into it, right? Like,
yeah,
because your situation's way different than mine.
Yep. Yeah, we will be a 3-car family at some point. Now, honestly, having him being able to drive, like, I can see why my parents were so excited that, like, I had to buy my first car. It was not expensive. I'm sure they helped me out behind the scenes. I had to pay for my own insurance and gas. But they were excited that I got my own car because they could stop taking me places. They're like, oh, you have band practice after school. You can just take yourself. Or I wanted to go see my friends. I could just take myself. So I think by the time he's 16, even though I'm sure I'll be nervous and I know he's going to do all kinds of stupid stuff in the car because I did all kinds of stupid stuff in my car. But it's nice to give him that freedom and then not have to be a chauffeur all the time. That he can take his sister places and not me.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's going to be a pretty big plus, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, so cars. So, yeah, we love it when we get questions. So if you've got more questions, feel free to send them our way. Because that was pretty good. So, yeah, thanks,
that was great.
Mike.
Thanks,
Mike.
Yeah.
All right, there's one more thing I want to talk about this week because I'm pretty excited about this. Have you... So, you and I are both Mac users.
We are.
And one of the things that's really underrated about using a Mac or using Linux on the desktop is the built-in terminal experience.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like a nice terminal, like having good SSH at your fingertips, like a nice looking terminal with, that's nice to look at, easy on the eyes, functions well, functions like a native SSH terminal is kind of good, right? And one thing that I've been playing with recently that I just want to mention on here, because I feel like people who use computers listen to us. If you're using Windows, I highly encourage you to check out the Windows Subsystem for Linux, which is kind of a weird name. But basically what it does is it adds a Linux shell to your Windows installation that for all intent and purpose kind of functions like a Linux distro inside of Windows. It's not necessarily a VM, although I think it might be technically. And what it does is it spins up a little bash session that you can use, and it comes with a couple things pre-installed. You use it pretty much like you use a regular old Linux terminal, right? So you have package manager support, so like apt or yum or what have you, depending on what you install. Not every package is compatible with this yet. Windows Subsystem for Linux version 2 is coming out and is going to solve a few of those little persistence issues. But I've been playing with it now for a few weeks, and as far as I'm concerned, you don't need PuTTY anymore, and you have a better terminal at your disposal. So if you're using Windows and you have to SSH into things, or you have to do command line stuff, I highly recommend that you check this out. The way it works is it is a Windows feature that you have to enable. And then when you enable it, you actually have to go to the Windows Store app in Windows 10. And you basically pick the distribution that you want to install. So for instance, I installed Ubuntu, 1604, 1610, or whatever the LTS was. And it works just like Ubuntu. The other thing I will say is that if you are on the latest build of Windows 10, which as of this recording is 1903, you can also download the new and improved Windows Terminal app. which basically gives you tab support inside of your console windows, so you can also ditch things like conemu finally.
Finally. I'm looking forward to using that, yeah.
Yeah, so it used to be you would have to download the source and build it to get it to work, but they did release a public preview on the Windows Store. Still a little rough around the edges. But, things that you take for granted when you don't use Windows for your default shell experience, it kind of highlights how kind of janky Windows users have to be to get shell experiences. So between the Windows Subsystem for Linux and the new Windows Terminal preview, it's a pretty good time for kind of the shell on Windows right now. So I just want to mention both of those things. Have you played with either of them yet?
I played a little bit with Windows Subsystem for Linux. I haven't played with the new terminal yet. So obviously, like being a software developer, there are lots of tools that, while they work on Windows, they're kind of more of Windows is a second-class citizen. The real support goes behind Linux and Unix and varieties like that. So I always enjoyed running those tools under the Windows Subsystem for Linux. So it was really running on Linux. Like, it had no idea that it was, just hiding behind a Windows install. Yeah, so I'm excited. I do less of that now, but I think it's smart. Windows is literally doing everything they can to court developers and super technical users, and I think it's smart. I think it's going to be great. I'm excited for the update for the WSL2, which is coming out soon, I think. Soonish. And the new terminal. So I don't use Windows much, except for a few cases at work. But yeah, no, it's good. I'm happy Microsoft is doing this. I think it's great. And I'm going to plug your blog. We'll put a link in the show notes. Drew wrote a great article called Going Native Using Windows Subsystem for Linux on his blog at port 1433. We'll make sure the link goes in the show notes.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's a great blog.
Yeah,
I read it, and sometimes I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I just want to give that a plug, right? Not just because of where I work now, but I'm a person who, despite what my job is and where I work, like I try to not use Windows when I can, just because I love using Mac OS, and I love I even like using Linux on the desktop a little bit. And it's little things like that, right? Like just having SSH support built into your OS, it just makes such a big difference, right? Like, and that's not to say that you can't do that in Windows. Like I hear people gnashing their teeth. Yes, I know you can install SSH in Windows now and launch it from the command line or a PowerShell prompt, but just having kind of native SSH commands in your terminal and being able to use certain packages in Windows without having to spin up an entire VM or remote into something and use it, like it makes a difference. And I've never been a big fan of PuTTY. Like I hate that it doesn't remember your connections, and I just don't think it's a great application. It's just been around forever, and people have just kind of accepted it. And we can do better, right?
And so many of these tools really they developed first for Linux. They run better on Linux. So being able to have that at your fingertips without having to boot a VM or go to a remote server on your Windows platform, I think just makes it more viable for developers to choose. So, good for them.
Yeah. Yeah, so there you go. That's pretty much all I had this week. What else you got for me?
No, I think that's a great podcast.
Yeah. Well, Paul, where can people find you on the Twitters these days?
I'm on Twitter at Paul Baylor. That's Bahler. And how about you, Drew?
I'm on the Twitters at Pittsburgh, Pittfurg. And, everybody, thanks for listening. We've gotten a lot of good feedback so far. I mean, I'm still having fun doing this.
Me too.
Yeah, no, it's a good time.
Yeah, like Drew said, if you have more ideas, again, thanks Mike Gadd, thanks Colin Ray for giving us some topic suggestions. We really appreciate it. So if anything else you'd like us to talk about, send them our way. We're on Twitter at DoingBestPod, and you can send us an email at contact@doingtheirbest.com.
Yep, and make sure you check out doingtheirbest.com for all the latest show notes and anything else like pictures or media or stuff that we want to post. So with that, Paul, I think that's a good one. So we'll talk to you guys next week.
Indeed.
All right, take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.